As night descends and darkness blankets the city, an eerie chill fills the air. You find yourself walking alone through the dimly lit streets, unaware of the horrors that lurk in the shadows. Suddenly, a feeling of unease washes over you as the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end. As you quicken your pace, you notice something peculiar. The shadows seem to dance and writhe, almost as if they have a life of their own. A cold shiver runs down your spine, and you can't shake the sensation that you are being watched. But by what exactly, you are yet to unveil. With each passing moment, the darkness seems to grow thicker and more sinister. You can't escape the feeling that something malevolent is following your every move, using the shadows as its cloak of concealment. The familiar streets now feel like a treacherous maze, and you can no longer trust the safety of the light. Every flickering street lamp casts doubt, and you find yourself questioning your own sanity. As you turn a corner, your heart skips a beat. There, standing just beyond the reach of the streetlight, is a pair of haunting, luminous eyes. They pierce through the darkness, locking onto yours with a predatory intensity that shocks your nervous system to its core. You can't see the figure clearly, but its presence is undeniable. They are here for you, to drag you kicking and screaming into the never-ending abyss. The oldest and strongest emotion is fear. And the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. The Lasombra clan are notorious for many things, but above all, they are a vampiric clan which thrives upon their ruthlessness. From their ancient clan progenitor casting a great shadow of fear across its conquered lands, to the newer brood of Cainites infecting the upper echelons of religious institutions to manipulate society at large, their ruthlessness in pursuit of power is rivaled by few. Hence, they are a clan enamored by the aspect of worship. Their elders venerate the ancient tales of shadowy gods, Artemis, Ahriman, Katal-Hayuk, and Tezcatlipoca. These stand as pillars of their desire for their primary feeding group, humanity, to be both in awe of and deathly afraid of. They are also a clan which can call upon their vitae to cast devastating powers which slither straight from the pages of Lovecraft himself. From calling upon shadows to cloak or devour any which touches their abyssal presence, to summoning mysterious dark tentacles, which can seep from the shadows or grow inside their victims, tearing them asunder. From their depraved Antediluvian, to their civil wars which split their ancient domains, to their dark connection with the infamous Sabbat. Come with me into the abyss and learn all about the clan who will sacrifice anything in their path to attain their immortal goals. But first, if you enjoy dark tales from grim universes or want to learn more about the world of darkness, perhaps leave a like or even subscribe, as it helps the channel immensely. What can be said about the Lasombra Antediluvian, the original vampire who spread its clan's unique bloodline across the world, is fairly sparse. The Lasombra themselves are not able to recall much information regarding the inception of this powerful Cainite. Knowledge of their sire, their mortal origins, or even their true name are obscured. The general sentiment surrounding the Antediluvian, however, is that in life it was unremarkable. A meager person who would amount to very little. However, with the powers of vampirism bestowed upon them, it would set forth into the world to earn its reputation, transcending far beyond its mortal destiny. The tales of the Lasombra Antediluvian within the Second City are far and few between. Many state that the beginning of the feud between the Ventrue and the Lasombra, two clans famed for their innate leadership, was kindled through their respective Antediluvians' jealousy for each other. However, the Lasombra Antediluvian had a greater influence over the world after the fall of the third generation and the end of the Second City. It is said that this ancient vampire originated from the Western Mediterranean and had an innate connection to the sea. Thus, it is speculated that its true origins lay in one of the many islands of this region. Some say this is Corsica or Sardinia, yet the more popular consensus is that it hailed from Malta. None know of its sire, and there's a vast amount of speculation upon how it came to be embraced into vampirism. Some even stated that the Lasombra Antediluvian was itself a creature of the sea, lurking within the dark, shadowy depths of the ocean, waiting for the opportune moment to captivate the fears of humanity. Whilst nothing is for certain, what we can surmise is that the Lasombra Antediluvian found great comfort within the waters of its home, and saw fit to expand its ambitions across the waves to bring its empire of shadows to every shore it saw fit. Leadership is something inherent to every Lasombra, as their blood is imbued with the essence of ruthlessness which brewed with great intensity from their antediluvian. Hence, when Lasombra sought to conquer the land surrounding them, it saw fit to surround itself and embrace those within the tradition of piracy. The Lasombra and the Sea People have a very detailed history, to the extent that the very name Lasombra may be derived from the chants of prisoners being burned at the stake by the Egyptians, chanting the words Lazar Omri Barash, as their flesh quickly charred into cinders and ash. The meaning of this phrase flows back to the conceptions of fear and darkness inherent within the Lasombra bloodline, for it simply means the god of the river of darkness. It is said that in these ancient times, Lasombra itself had ascended to the mantle of godhood over these peoples. The Hyksos in particular were regarded as its pawns, and within the 2nd millennia BC, they had ravaged all of the mercantile trade routes around the Mediterranean, and had forced many Bronze Age civilizations into complete submission, to the extent that these sea peoples ruled over Egypt for 2 dynasties. The name of Lasombra was on every mortal's lips, whether they traversed the seas or not. No one could sail without paying homage to these pirates, and thus no one could travel without knowing the undying fear of the Master of Shadows. From Thebes to Athens, many used another term, coined by a ship captain who narrowly escaped a massacre from a raiding party of these fanatical pirates, using the term Lasombra to describe the god these pirates worshipped. This roughly translates from Proto-Indo-European as profiting together by domination. However, Lasombra's grasp over the collective consciousness of all that lived in and around these areas was not to last forever, and by 1672 BC, a great cataclysmic event occurred. It was on this year that the volcanic island of Thera erupted, spewing dark clouds of ash into the skies and dimming the vicious rays of the sun. Many would think this would be profitable for the Lasombra, who thrived in such conditions. However, all vampires must eat, and when these mortals are afflicted by the devastation a volcanic eruption emits, it is much harder to extract blood from those who cannot sustain themselves. Thus, with diminishing feeding stocks and their coastal havens damaged, a third of Lasombra vampires embraced within this time dispersed. Whilst the sea recovered quicker than the land, even the Antediluvian saw fit to venture outwards from its shadowy domain upon Malta, and embarked on a century-long wandering. It brought with them its eldest child, Montano, an ancient Methuselah and powerful manipulator of the shadows, known as Obtenebration. The Lasombra Antediluvians scarcely travelled alone, and thus vampires of this clan are scattered across the world, from Africa to interior Asia. Their bloodline is stretched far and wide. After Thera, however, the position of the Lasombra was weakening, and with the decline of the golden age of piracy in the Mediterranean, more strife was just on the horizon. Alexander the Great first constrained these ancient pirates, and for half a decade, the Sea People could scarcely conduct their brutal raids or acts of piracy across their once controlled waters. However, the death nail would come from Rome in 68 BC. Pompey, a general who garnered great power and wealth from the Roman Senate in mere months, made sure to eradicate this brutal piracy from the Mediterranean. This ardent policing seized the Lasombra's sphere of influence over their domains, dispatching every rogue who wished to conduct violence in the name of piracy. The sea was no longer theirs, as it was now bestowed a new name, Mare Nostrum, or Our Sea. Rome saw fit to conduct sieges upon the Lasombra havens, which once bolstered various pirates in the region. Many of their great havens fell through a series of violent attacks, destroying these once impenetrable fortresses through the might of the Roman war machine. In Malta, the Antediluvian's own domain fell to such attacks, and thus it was forced to flee to a domain within Sicily, a notorious haven which would become known as the Black Citadel. It is worthy to note that whilst great tragedy and natural disaster had ravaged much of the Lasombra strongholds, this did not entirely diminish their place as rulers within their chosen domains. Quite the contrary. The Sea of Shadows persisted as one of the most expansive vampiric fiefdoms during what is known as the Dark Ages. It profited greatly from the fall of Constantinople, where the Lasombra were able to slither and infect many Byzantine holdings, annexing them into their shadowy empire. However, whilst the Lasombra Antediluvian still existed in a state of torpor, most of this expansion was carried out through its childer, namely its eldest child, Montano. Perhaps the most infamous tale regarding the Lasombra Antediluvian is, ironically, its demise. As stated prior, the Lasombra have a rather special connection with the Sabbat. Along with the Demise and those of the Giovanni bloodline, they were one of the first clans to break their blood bonds and destroy their clan progenitor. However, such events would cause a great rift within the clan. The majority of Clan Lasombra today hails from those who split from the Antediluvian's control, under the leadership of the kindred Gratiano di Veronese. He was a scion of a noble Italian family in the 12th century AD, and a talented preacher, yet was not below utilizing the indoctrinated masses he had accumulated to rally into vicious mobs, tormenting his rivals and ensuring his position at the top of the social pecking order. During this time, Italy was a fractured land, of many individual kingdoms, city-states, and principalities, where some were fiercely governed by other countries, such as the German Empire to the north and the Norman kingdoms in Sicily. Gratiano had ambitions to grant more autonomy to the Italian people, to assemble an effective coalition to force the imperial governments at large, but such efforts would inevitably fail. It is said that his efforts to conjure up this resistance were the reason for so many city-states being rid of their autonomy altogether, as the Norman kingdoms and the imperial rulers would crush any sentiments of independence. Gratiano quickly realized that he was not destined to be the next Charlemagne, and after one fateful visit to the emperor, Gratiano's own family turned upon him, undermining his future endeavors and condemning him to a punishment worthy of his betrayal. However, whilst mortal hands attempted to twist the fates of history, they completely neglected the looming shadows which spread like a plague about the empire, encroaching upon a man they deemed worthy of ascension. The Lasombra Antediluvian had deemed it timely to create a new child. Having taken a great fascination in Gratiano, it would await the perfect moment to embrace the man, and to induct him into the abyssal world of the Lasombra. Gratiano had attempted to rile up support for his cause regarding the imperial court, yet for the first time in his life, he had encountered outright defeat. He could not penetrate the mental barriers of the courtiers, but whilst being undermined by his own family, he had been seduced by the Bavarian and Bohemian nobles to betray those who had already placed a knife in his back. These nobles had convinced him to betray his former associates within the pursuit of Italian autonomy, in exchange for estates and greater opportunities in Germany, and these offers seemed very appealing for a power-hungry Gratiano. His change in sentiment, however, was not a secret one, and thus, as he returned to his parents, he would be arrested for treachery. Placed in a darkened cell upon the threat of imminent execution, Gratiano's days as a living man were numbered. Fate, however, is a fickle thing, especially when it is being manipulated by the dark tendrils of a godlike being who has watched your ascent and collapse from the very shadows. At night within the jail, the Lasombra Antediluvian visited his cell and spoke. It was in the Antediluvian's custom to never force the embrace on those that didn't wish it, and thus it wished Gratiano to ask for the change. Gratiano, in the beginning, before the eyes of the abominable entity, was pondering upon declining. He felt sure that he could negotiate himself out of the executioner's blades, yet the more he spoke with it, the more he became entranced by the morbid tales of the nature of the Cainite. Ultimately, however, Gratiano would refuse, seeing some form of opportunity in his mortal life. The Antediluvian rescinded back into the shadows, and Gratiano spent another night in his own personal hell. Over the next 24 hours, the guards had inflicted horrific pains upon Gratiano, tortured, beaten, maimed, and defiled, he became a desecrated version of his former self. Huddled into the corner of his cell, he awaited the death which was promised for him. However, instead of the clutches of the Reaper tugging at his soul, he saw before him the shadowy figure. He could barely see, as his eyes were swollen shut from the multitude of beatings, and he could not stand before the creature, as both of his legs were broken beyond repair. Beyond Gratiano's knowledge, his pains, his torment, his utter despair were at the hands of this malevolent creature. The guards did not need much convincing. The Antediluvian simply revealed the myriad of truths about Gratiano's betrayal. Proof of the German deals, his betrayal of his family, and Italian autonomy. All was enough for the guards to invoke the worst torments imaginable upon this young man. And so, upon revealing its image once more, the Antediluvian offered Gratiano one more opportunity to accept its deal. Listening with more care to this morbid creature, he soon realized this situation was one he could not best with mere mortal wit alone. And with that, he accepted the Antediluvian's offer, and within that bloodied cell, he was embraced into the Lasombra clan. With the Antediluvian, he left the jail cell through the powers of blood magic, and was set upon a course of unveiling the expanse of this dark empire the Lasombra clan had created throughout his homeland. Every piece of information which was bestowed upon him unveiled another plot which he was unable to enact as a mere mortal man. And the more he learned, the more he wished to topple this abominable god, as he once wished to do for the Emperor in his mortal life. Yet Gratiano was a cunning man, and his first step was to become the Antediluvian's prodigy. He continued to pursue his goals within Italy, under the guise of acting upon the Antediluvian's best interests. He flattered the cruel and ruthless being, pulling the strings that he had once done in those courts in Germany, and many elders were wise enough to see through Gratiano's charm. They attempted to whisper into the Antediluvian's ear, yet their words were met with a deafening silence. Gratiano soon learned that these powers above him, the elders of vampiric society who had roamed the earth for thousands of years, were the main generators of his confinement to rank and file. He could not extend outwards to pursue his potential to its fullest, and neither could he sink low enough to be a disgrace upon the clan. He hated the ties of the blood which ruled over him, and he desired a fresh opportunity. Many vampires in this age yearn for such a thing, but Gratiano was special. He would act upon it. After a century of unlife, Gratiano would witness the era of revolt. In this time, between the 14th and 15th centuries, plagues would wipe out vast feeding stocks of mortals, yet the vampires would sire more and more children, creating overpopulation in domains across Europe. All the while many suffered, the Methuselahs exerted unobtainable prestige over the young kindred. Many of the Antediluvians at this time were subject to seemingly unending torpor, and none reared their heads in the midst of this struggle. Thus, the Methuselahs, the progeny of these Antediluvians, saw fit to take charge of the growing numbers of vampires, with an air of tyrannical authority. Every year saw relations between the eldest of vampire kind and the youngest sour tenfold. Violence would erupt in open view, as fang and claw would meet in bloody fury over the most trivial of matters. While such battles took place, the mortals were slowly realizing their ability to push back against the forces of the undead. It was indeed Cainites themselves that initially alerted these so-called hunters of the Inquisition to take up arms against the kindred, and such foolery would culminate into the Burning Times, a great crusade which would see the final deaths of many vampires. With the Inquisition ferreting out vampires from their havens, and the growing Ottoman Empire driving vampiric operations west, this vast overcrowding of Cainites would soon lead to a dire situation, one in which many would perish, but others would vastly profit. Gratiano was one of these profiteers. Whilst 1,500 vampires perished by the flames of the Inquisition, he had made a vast network of connections across the world of anarchs. He had constructed a web of mortals, religious orders, trade networks, and loyal vampires, which would service his cause. He became somewhat of a tutor, building a Socratic academy for willing Cainites, to learn about the tyranny of the elders and sow dissent for their place in vampiric society. He traveled across Europe, making alliances with various clans, with the Banu Hakim being perhaps the most important of all. By the turn of the century in 1400, Gratiano was fully convinced he could overthrow the Antediluvian and topple his so-called Sea of Shadows. However, by the middle of the century, plans started to come to fruition, and it would not be the swift turning of the tables Gratiano had once expected. Lasombra enforcers of the Victory Corps, led by the eldest child of the Antediluvian Montano, quickly sought out bands of Anarch-Cainites. This was a group of elite vampiric soldiers whom were once tasked with combating other vampiric clans to secure the fiefdom the Lasombra held dearly at their core. Now they pursued these anarchs, and even stooped to diablerie, the draining of another vampire's soul, to crush these pockets of resistance in the name of the Antediluvian. However, the anarchs' plans were set in motion, and as the years came and went, more and more elders perished at the hands of this revolt. The Courts of Blood, ancient Lasombra practices which dictate the direction of the clan, met regularly to discuss how they would counter these attacks. Yet with every meeting, the cabals of elders dwindled more and more. They pressed the Antediluvian to act, yet in the midst of meditative torpor, it remained silent. It did not notice, neither did it care for the outcomes of its progeny. It simply reveled in the darkness of its own making. Gratiano, with the aid of the Banu Hakim, sought about curating a hit list of elders, which he felt needed to be dispatched imminently. At the top was the eldest of them all, Montano. Yet Gratiano soon realized that his efforts of mental forgery and domination, even assisted by the Banu Hakim, would be in vain against these most senior of vampires. However, he was able to utilize these powers against the mortals, and thus he took to dominating these populations so thoroughly that they would bend to his every whim. By 1483, the clan was in complete disarray. Knowing that this may be the opportune time to strike, Gratiano summoned a great force of anarchs to raid the Castle of Shadows upon Sicily. There, the slumbering Antediluvian remained in torpor, and the very defenders of the castle were stuck between the all-consuming violence of the revolt and the godlike being resting in the belly of the citadel. After a short yet intense battle, Gratiano stood victorious over the castle's inhabitants. With his band of revolutionaries, they had forced the eldest child Montano to flee through his powers of Obtenebration, utilizing the shadows to escape, to step into the abyss in a display yet unseen to the Lasombra. He evaded capture, yet was now effectively exiled from the clan. The surrendered populace were granted an ultimatum: join Gratiano's revolt or become bloodbags for the army. The revolutionaries were then able to walk freely into the citadel. The great umbrous void spirits, the entities of oblivion which guarded the Antediluvian in the lower depths of the castle, were not present. The descent was remarkably easy. When they saw within the chamber of that morbid creature the source of all their pains and ambitions, they set upon it like a horde of ravenous beasts. They drained the Antediluvian whole, until its body resembled that of an onyx shell, crumbling into a fine ash which left a tarry residue on its torporic chamber. Gratiano had won, and the clan was now without its head. Gratiano would not do as Augustus Giovanni had once done after dispatching his own clan progenitor, and would not take the mantle of clan founder. He founded the Friends of the Night, Amici Noctis, and stated that it was up to every member of Clan Lasombra to find meaning in their inception, their embrace, and their place within both the clan and the world of Cainites. Many joined this union, whereas others simply remained silent. Montano frantically campaigned to overturn the decisions enacted by Gratiano, but to no avail. He and his followers were branded anti-tribe, or anti-tribu, and were exiled from the trajectory of the clan's main line. Gratiano had forged a path for the members of Clan Lasombra to tread for centuries to come. A decade after the siege of the Black Citadel, the Convention of Thorns would conclude the first Anarch revolt. Some Anarchs would capitulate and give in to the elders' promises of allegiance and safety from the flames of the Inquisition. Others would join another sect, one which refuted the power of the elders, the Sabbat. It is said that without Gratiano de Veronese, there would be no Sabbat, and without the Sabbat, there would be no Camarilla. For years to come, the Clan Lasombra would be caught in the midst of the political turmoil which would forever shape vampiric history. The eternal struggle between the Camarilla and the Sabbat. The clan Lasombra would further grow into the infamous clan they are today. They were the leaders of the Sabbat. They infiltrated the Catholic Church and steered religious masses whichever way they pleased. Their ruthlessness would only grow further, like the tendrils of their deceased progenitor, planting themselves deep into the existence of mortals and kindred alike, and ensuring their memory would persist through almighty fear. Like their progenitor and Lasombra vampires past, each new fledgling embraced into the clan is chosen specifically for their ideals, and are afforded no time for weakness. They seek out those that do not have the time for sympathy, or the mortal morality which is seen as a profound weakness to a Lasombra Cainite. They tend to choose those who have seen a darker side to life, but rise above these situations to only excel further. They have been stereotyped as a clan of sociopaths, survivors, and deviants, yet many mortals selected for embrace tend to exhibit some of these traits. When a Lasombra sets their sights on a potential child, they are often given a test to prove their worth. This will often involve the mortal's life crumbling before their very eyes, their business failing, their family perishing, or suffering great physical trauma from the monster that has unwillingly selected them for the change. If they rise above these circumstances, they will be deemed fit for a life of undeath. This essence of selectiveness and prestige tends to present them as somewhat elegant and purposeful. A Lasombra is never without options, and thus their ability to have choices becomes their biggest ally, whereas their rival clan, the Ventrue, are constrained by notions of lineage and a strict hierarchy. The Lasombra tend to place themselves on a higher pedestal. They are, in many ways, polar opposites. The Ventrue place great prestige in statesmanship and ruling domains, whereas the Lasombra prefer the openness of societal manipulation through equally powerful institutions. However, they are not without inherent vampiric weaknesses. The Lasombra are burdened with the inability to have no reflection. They are stuck between the physical realm and the abyss, and thus their image is either completely absent or entirely distorted. In camera footage, they can appear as hazy silhouettes, and electronics buzz and crackle at their very touch. This makes modern life nearly impossible, yet for a Lasombra, they must overcome these trivial setbacks. They are also constrained by their sense of ruthlessness, which was passed down from their clan progenitor. The Lasombra Antediluvian was not beyond massacring entire villages to gain what it desired. Such was the case when it sired its first child. Hence, for every Lasombra present, they feel compelled to succeed by any means necessary. Failure does not seem to compute within their vitae, and thus the beast within them will flare and rage whenever they encounter a situation where success is not a certain outcome. However, these outcomes can be pitted in their favor, with their innate usage of their signature power through the blood, Obtenebration, or Oblivion, within modern knights. The arms of Ahriman, or the arms of the Abyss, are onyx tentacles which can be summoned by a Lasombra to enact their dark bidding. Spawning from the abyss itself, through the shadows nearest to a Cainite, they are able to constrain a foe within their powerful grasp, locking them in place, inflicting damage upon them swiftly or agonizingly to reach a certain result. This power alone is enough to inspire eldritch dread into any mortal, and may perhaps extend to some Cainites who have never set eyes upon such monstrosities in their previous nights. The darkness within is a power exerted by Elder Lasombra, which calls upon the essence of the abyss deep within a Lasombra's vitae. Amassing this darkness within their soul, they violently spew this horrific essence through their mouth or cut vessels, boiling away a foe's blood in a cloud of malignant violence. The soul scarring it exerts leaves a body completely drained of blood, and will open the eyes of many to the destructive capability of a Lasombra Elder. Ahriman's Demise is a power only exerted by a few Lasombra vampires, and is so devastating that it can consume an entire area in a pitch-black perimeter. This darkness is fabled to be the abyss itself, and within a 15-meter radius, the vampire can drag any body, friend or foe, into this abominable realm, where their fate is immortally sealed. The Lasombra are rightfully one of the most feared clans within the world of darkness. From their dominance over the seas to their mastery of the shadows, they are a clan which will further manipulate the world of darkness for centuries. Through any means necessary, the ruthless world of the Lasombra shows that fear is the only way to rule the world of darkness, and above all, the fear of those who reside in the shadows, yet unknown. Thank you for watching. If you got to this part of the video, thank you so much. The poll I created for this video gained a great amount of traction within the community, and I may do another in the next video just to gauge what you guys want to see. With more Bloodlines 2 news just around the corner, I'm keeping my ear to everything VTM related, and will hopefully update you as soon as I can with all my thoughts on the franchise and where I think it might be heading. So if you really enjoyed this video, it would mean a lot if you leave a comment and let me know what you thought, or what you want to see next, and obviously a like and a subscribe would go a long way, and sharing this video to whoever you think would find this interesting obviously helps me in the algorithm. And so, until next time, stay safe, and do not wander naively into the night.